Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm here at the Miserable Liberal and Ron Placone.
Hi, Jimmy.
Hello.
Ron's going to be in Austin Saturday, right?
That's right. Saturday night, November 10th. Tickets still available. RonPlacone.com.
Go check him out, Austin. So we're still doing some postmortem on the election, the midterm election, and movement. There's a movement for a People's Party, right? Which is the Bernie political director Nick Brana, who started this organization, and they're trying to get a third party because the majority of people don't belong to either of the two parties, and the overwhelming majority of Americans want a third party, and the Democratic Party, in their view and in my view too, it's not reformable. So I could be wrong about that. I don't think so. But so they put out their analysis, and I thought it was really interesting, and I'm going to share some of it with you, and then we'll talk to the author, okay? So the four leading progressive organizations that emerged from Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign endorsed Democratic candidates across 46 states. Nearly all the candidates for Congress, governor, lieutenant governor, and Senate lost. That's Our Revolution, Justice Democrats, Brand New Congress, and the Democratic Socialists of America endorsed a combined 107 candidates for Congress this year. So that's not local, that's not state, that's on the federal level for Congress. And so 107 candidates combined of all those organizations. 44 of them won their primaries, and only 12 won their general elections. 12. 5 of those 12 were already in Congress. So that leaves 7. 5 of those 7 were longtime party politicians in line for higher office rather than insurgent candidates. So that leaves 2. Only 2 of them were actually opposed by the party and unseated establishment Democrats in the primaries. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who we had on the show before anybody else had her on their shows, and Ayanna Pressley. There are 435 members of Congress, so it gets worse. Almost every candidate those groups endorsed for governor, lieutenant governor, and Senate lost in the primary or general election. That includes 13 candidates for governor, 5 candidates for lieutenant governor, and 7 candidates for U.S. Senate. Incumbents Bernie Sanders and David Zuckerman were the only ones who won. As a result, the blue wave is a corporate wave that has swept in the same kind of Democrat politicians that drove working people into Donald Trump's arms after 8 years of Obama. When Democrats busy themselves serving the wealthy again, the result will be an even sharper lurch to the authoritarian right. So they're making the case here that it doesn't appear that this revolution is happening. And if you look at the numbers, it's not. But here's what I really like. This is actually, I think, a very good piece of writing. It says, progressives cannot do the same thing year after year, charging headlong into the Democratic Party and expect different results. Breaking the cycle means changing your approach. With 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, healthcare costs rising, student debt piling up, Americans live more precarious lives than they have in generations. Now here, listen to this. This is really good. Working people seek solutions that are proportionate to the size of the problems we face. I'll read that again. Working people seek solutions that are proportionate to the size of the problems we face. So when Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein say we're going to protect the Affordable Care Act, that is not proportionate to the size of the healthcare problems that we're facing. Because if they do that, they're still ignoring the 30 million people that have no healthcare. They're still ignoring all those people who can't afford their deductible to go see a doctor the first time. A lot of people have $5,000 deductibles. So, and you saw their speeches. We showed it to you, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, the leader, and her speech was empty, nothing. She wants to do unity. Something that looks and feels new down to our bones. That's what people are looking for. Incrementalism and an attempt at rebranding of the Democratic Party are the well-worn paths of the cycle into oligarchy. The Democratic Party is a prison for our movement. It's a wall that keeps us from connecting with people and inspiring the millions who want authentic, credible change. The Democratic Party is a wall. That's what the Democratic Party is, the wall that keeps us progressives from connecting with people and inspiring the millions who want authentic, credible change. Had we had committed ourselves to building it after the 2016 election, we would have either forced the Democratic Party to change in the face of an existential threat, or we would be replacing it and the Republican Party right now. Instead, most of us decided to work inside the Democratic Party, so the cycle continues, voraciously consuming our climate, our economy, our society, and our lives. Now, that's pretty amazing stuff. I just want to now bring in the gentleman. Any comment from my panel, Ron, Steph?
Well, yeah, I mean, you couldn't help but wonder, and there were some, progressive victories, and you couldn't help but wonder, what if we were doing all of this under a totally different umbrella, and
Right.
all of us had kind of one force ahead? Because something we mentioned on a previous segment that I'll just add before you bring Nick in, progressive policies did very, very well overall.
That's a great point.
Those policies need a face. People aren't making the connection between these blank suit politicians and those types of policies. So it needs a new brand. You wonder what could have happened.
Sorry. When you see people in your community that are in dire straits.
Right.
And when you have people in your life that are paycheck to paycheck, and even as a teacher, we don't have kids, and having a teacher's salary, is I don't know how my friends afford a family. I mean, that's the big issue. And I know that the crisis of healthcare, it still exists. People don't leave positions, their employment, when they want access to something else because they're afraid of their healthcare coverage. And you're right. Every time I see a corporate Democrat get up and speak, it's like they will not talk about peace. They will not talk about health care for everybody. And they certainly won't talk about climate change.
So now let me bring in Nick Brana. Nick, he's a friend of the show. He's the founder and director of Movement for a People's Party. And the mission of the Movement for a People's Party is building a coalition of working people unions, community groups, student chapters, academics, progressive parties, and left organizations to launch a new People's Party. Please welcome back to the show. It's Nick Brana.
Hey, Jimmy. It's great to be with you.
Hey, Nick. Great to have you here. Now, I really like that article. And so when the Democrats took over Congress, right? So they got, what did they get? 26? We found 26. So they barely squeaked into taking back the Congress. They needed 23. I think they got 26. So it wasn't a blue wave like people were hoping. And what I've been saying is, like, here's the most unpopular, unlikable GOP president in the history of our country, and they barely took back the House. And I think it's because they don't have a vision for the future. And what you just said was really interesting. Would you like to expand on anything?
Yeah, and so I want to start by saying that it's not whatsoever the fault of those who are working inside the Democratic Party, those who are working in those four organizations, Our Revolution, Justice Democrats, Brand New Congress, DSA, that we got these kinds of results. I know many of them, they really worked, they put their heart into it, and it was a very genuine effort that they have been making. But I'm a social scientist, Jimmy. I studied sociology at William & Mary. And what you do in the scientific method is that you evaluate the results of a particular action, experiment, test after having done it. That's how science works. And so what we need to do now, Jimmy, is we need to sit back and we need to soberly analyze the results of our strategy. In 2016, we embarked upon a mission to give the progressive majority in this country. As you said, the large majority of Americans are progressive when you go down the issues. And so we embarked on a mission to give them an electoral face and representation. Now, most people chose the Democratic Party. The bulk of the movement chose the Democratic Party as the vehicle to attempt to do that. That's not the only path. And as the evidence shows, increasingly so, and historical, that is not whatsoever the best path either. And so I think what we need right now, before we rush headlong again into the Democratic Party, into yet another cycle down the spiral of oligarchy, is we need to pause. We need to see what the results were. We need to do an honest tally. And then we need to ask ourselves if this is the best approach.
So I'm told that most of the people who were won or flipped districts and won were Medicare for all. Is that, did you know? So aren't most of the incoming new people Medicare for all people?
The Democrats have campaigned on Medicare for all every time they're out of power. Every time. And then when they get into power, they don't do it. What about all the states where they have power right now? And they're now passing Medicare for all, and they're blocking it. What about when Obama was in office? You know, this is a routine for the Democrats. They know how popular it is. They campaign on it. They get into office. They abandon it. Some of the progressive candidates, the endorsed progressive candidates, Andrew Gillum, for example, Gavin Newsom, they dropped it the minute they won their primary. So this is typical.
So I make that point that I live in California, the bluest of the blue state. They've had a super majority in their legislature. Plus, we had Jerry Brown, a Democrat governor. We still have fracking. We don't have free college, and we don't have Medicare for all. In fact, there was a Democrat, Anthony Rendon, who blocked it in the House. So, and he just got reelected. And the Democratic Party and the bluest state in the Union, California, is sending back to Washington Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi. So this, we're in real dire straits. Like, I'm not just trying to be a contrarian. This isn't working. So I would love for the Justice Democrats to have been able to take over, and I would love for them to be able to board the ship and reform the Democratic Party with Bernie Sanders. And that would have been fantastic. It just, like you said, your social, it just doesn't, it's not happening. This idea that that would mean that the donors would just then let go of the party, and that's never going to happen, right?
Yeah, it's really not. There's now going to be, somewhere around 225 Democrats in Congress. Okay, so the number of Democrats who won, who were endorsed by those four organizations, is 12. Like you pointed out earlier, and 5 of them are incumbents. And most of the ones who are incoming, they were taking the position of someone who used to be a progressive anyways, like John Conyers, who stepped out. Okay, they're replacing his seat, or Keith Ellison, who stepped away to run for, replacing his seat. And so it's just, objectively, it's not happening, and the really, I would say the frustrating part, but also the inspiring part, is that we don't have to do this. This is not the only approach. Okay, there are progressive movements in other countries. They're doing different things, and guess what? They're working. They're actually winning.
Like what?
And they're winning against greater odds than we face here in the United States. I'll give you one example. Is in Mexico. Just this summer, López Obrador started a party 4 years ago. Began as a movement, then it became a party 4 years ago. In 4 years, they had thrown out the two establishment parties that have run Mexico for more than 100 years. Okay? They won this summer, this July, the presidency. They won both majorities in both houses of the legislature. They won the majority of the mayorships. That is an overwhelming win and mandate. That bears no resemblance to the kind of trickle that we have over here. That's what a political revolution looks like in Mexico. And it's not just Mexico. It's Spain, in France, even though he didn't win. Mélenchon, in Greece, Syriza. You may disagree with things they've done since then, but the point is they are having success with those strategies. In Chile, Frente Amplio. Okay, they're breaking two-party systems in these countries with new progressive parties. That's what it takes.
So
Okay, and I should say too that in Mexico, the level of corruption and it just dwarfs what we have in the United States. I mean, in Mexico, it is routine for politicians to get killed. The corruption involving with the narco traffic is immense. The level of voter fraud was also tremendous, and yet still you had Lopez Obrador winning a huge, huge victory. And so there are other ways to do it, and that's what we need to do now. We need to create our own new party so that we can join our sisters and brothers abroad who are actually revolutionizing their country.
now in Mexico, did they have a charismatic leader that helped to build that party, or was
They had Lopez Obrador. Yeah, and so
I'm-
he
so-
is.
was he already, like I'm saying, was he already popular, kind of like how Bernie is now, or did he just come out of nowhere?
No, he is popular. He hasn't always been this popular. His popularity very recently increased tremendously. So very much like Bernie, and he committed himself. He and many others were working in Mexico's center-left party for a long time, and then they came to the conclusion, a difficult conclusion, that they had to step away from what was familiar, from what they had known their whole lives, and they had to create something new because they realized that they hit the limits, they hit the ceiling inside that vehicle. Okay, just as we've done here in the United States, we have hit the ceiling how far you can go with the Democratic Party.
So how it's well, but what is needed in the United States for a third party to gain traction is to have a charismatic leader that's popular from one of the two parties, I think. So if Bernie did that, that's what I've been saying. If he would have did that, it would have worked. He didn't do it, and there doesn't seem like anyone else is going to do it. So
It
go ahead.
definitely, yeah, go ahead.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah, that definitely would do it, but that's not the only thing that would do it. What we're working on right now is building a coalition, particularly with unions. And so we announced the Labor Community Campaign for an Independent Party just a couple months ago, and we've already had Cornel West, Chris Hedges jump on. We were happy to get your support, Jimmy, and Ron's, who's with you, and Steph. And also many leaders inside the labor movement, people like Baldemar Velasquez, who leads the more than 20,000 person Farm Labor Organizing Committee, Chris Silvera in New York, who leads the Teamsters 808 local, and Donna DeWitt, who was on the executive board of the AFL-CIO. And so we have a number of very impressive, very accomplished labor figures who are joining and saying, you know what, the labor movement is not one-dimensional. There's a number of people, many people inside the labor movement, particularly in the rank and file, that they don't want to work with the Democrats anymore. And what we need right now in the labor movement is we need essentially a rallying flag so that all of those people can get together, start organizing and speaking with a unified voice. And that's what we're creating.
Now, Nick, after the 2016 election, I covered a story about how the union leaders, including the teachers union, got together and they had a meeting they have every year, and they decided that the Democratic Party was not doing it for them and that they needed a third party. And then 2 years went by and I heard nothing from them. Why has that? Why did they do nothing?
Right. Well, the Democratic Party and their donors and others inside the AFL-CIO who don't want an independent party are always trying to pressure unions to stay in line. But their ability to do that is decreasing because last year at the AFL-CIO's National Convention, 2 resolutions were passed that actually call for independent politics and a break with lesser evil politics, and the exploration of the creation of a labor party, of a labor-based party. So that's very significant. That represents the fact that the leadership inside the labor movement and inside the AFL-CIO can no longer contain those people inside the union movement who want something different.
So even Randy Weingarten, who was the president of the teachers union, or one of them, she was on board with that. She signed off on that too, correct?
She was one of the people who supported one of those resolutions. That's right, the break with lesser evil resolutions. Yeah, and there are others. For example, the APWU, represented by Mark Dimenstein, Roseanne DeMoro also supported that. So many, many very accomplished labor leaders and their unions, were represented.
And so how long do you think? I mean, how much longer? So now it's 2 more years. Excuse me, until 2020. How much longer till we get an actual viable third party?
Well, I hope, Jimmy, that what does not happen is that the election cycles in this country are different from any other country. Essentially, it's endless. You're always in the midst of an election cycle, and what happens with the progressive movement here is that things continually get worse. As we described in the article, climate change gets worse, inequality gets worse, student debt piles up, healthcare access decreases, the costs increase. Okay, so that creates a kind of like a frantic, feel inside the progressive movement and the progressive community. And I think, oh my God, we need a solution that's going to happen in like 2 seconds. And there's an election coming up in less than 2 years, always an election coming up in less than 2 years. And so we're in this burning house, and, we just kind of like got this, we have this gasoline. Maybe we should just keep throwing it at it, keep throwing it at the house. Or we're in a ditch, just keep digging. The solution, oh my gosh, now the ditch is deeper, dig faster. So we actually need to think about what it is that we're doing. That's what we're doing as Movement for a People's Party. Like you pointed out, the large majority of Americans want a major new party, and that statistic has increased over the past 15 years by about like 20%. So it's now at 57%, and it's been that high. It's been above 50% for the past 5 years. And even more incredibly is the fact that now a majority of Democrats, self-described Democrats, say that they want a major new party, that they want a third party. So it's overwhelming.
So something like 26% of the electorate calls themselves a Democrat, and you're saying that how many of those people are calling for a third party?
Among Democrats, 54%. 54% of Democrats. And yeah, exactly. And like you said, they're only 26% of the country, because over the last 15 years, you've also seen a massive disaffiliation with the Democratic and the Republican parties. So you have 45% independents right now, and you have about half of the Democrats and half of the Republicans, the people who still call themselves that, like not the people who've left, but half of the Democrats and Republicans also say we need an independent party. When you're done calculating it, Jimmy, 13% of Americans are left who are happy with being Democrats.
That's amazing. Ron made a good point earlier about how a lot of ballot measures across the country were progressive that won. And for instance, in Florida, so they had a ballot measure there that would give the right to vote back to felons, right? So that's 1.2 million people in that state aren't allowed to vote because they have a felony conviction, and they passed a resolution that said they can vote now. But yet the progressive candidate lost for governor. So it's weird that progressive legislation wins, but the Democrat loses. And it seems to me that there's just a lot of people who aren't going to vote for a Democrat. And because the Democratic Party is so tainted, and especially a Democrat who campaigns with Hillary Clinton, the least popular politician in the history. So I think it's that association. What do you think? You think that because people are for progressive, they pass minimum wage all the time. They pass legal marijuana. They pass all these, but they've passed Medicaid expansion in Nebraska, Utah, Idaho. They passed Medicaid expansion in those blood red states, and yet they won't vote for a Democrat. So I think it's because the Democratic Party is so tainted and so doesn't stand for anything. What do you think?
It is. Americans say that they view the Democratic Party as the party of the elite over Republicans.
Really?
Yeah. Just think about that.
Wow.
So that is because Democrats, working class Americans look at they watch TV, they watch CNN, and they see these elite corporate media people bashing the Republicans all the time, bashing Trump in particular, and basically siding with the Democrats, and this happens in basically all of these countries that have turned to either far right parties or left parties, is that people begin to realize that the corporate media is a part of the establishment and part of the elite that they hate. And so they do things to spite them. They say, well, if those people who live in the freaking steel towers, who are looking down at me and giving me orders, I'm just going to, cast a vote for Brexit. I'm going to cast a vote for Trump because fuck them, I just want to go against them. And so you're right. The Democratic Party's brand is absolutely toxic, and it rubs off, and it's an anchor. It's a deadweight now to the progressive movement, despite the fact that we know that people are clamoring for those very policies.
That's the thing that's amazing to me. Well, Nick, I hope you can get it done. I can't wait for the day when I can go and vote for a slate of candidates that you've worked with. So that's what I'm really waiting for. I hope it happens. And where can people help out if people are interested in helping out a movement for a people's party? And what can they do?
Yeah, so this is eminently doable. It's happening in other countries where it's more difficult than it is here. More difficult. And so come help us at forapeoplesparty.org. And you can also email us at organize@forapeoplesparty.org. We need your help as volunteers, as contributors. It's going to take, it takes people power to make this happen, but we can do it, and we have to do it.
All right, Nick, thanks for being our guest, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Our next live Jimmy Dore show is February 1st in Burbank, California. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a list of all our live shows, and please become a premium member if you can. Become a patron. It's the way we support this show because they're coming at us, and we give you bonus. We give you hours of bonus material every week. Check it out. Become a patron. And if you can, make sure you're still subscribed. They unsubscribe people every day. I know it sounds crazy. It only takes a second. Please make sure and click that bell when you subscribe so they'll send you a notice when we drop a video. Thanks for your support.